Hey guys, Christian here. I'm one of the techs at Looking Glass Photo that helps with sensor cleanings in the shop. And today what I'm going to do is walk you through the very basic steps to clean your own sensor with just a handful of assets and a little bit of time and a little bit of care in a relatively clean environment. Now the disclaimer on this is going to be that this is a video that ought to get most folks moving along with this process. But if for any reason you do not feel comfortable tackling a sensor clean on your own, sit tight and hopefully very soon we will be offering that service once again in the shop. But again, it's a very straightforward thing, and what I'm going to do is talk with you about the process and procedure for cleaning your own sensor. Now, the first thing that you want to do is consider working in a relatively clean environment. We don't want lots of dust and or dirt, so try to find a location where you can set up your camera and your assets in a place that is relatively dust-free. Now, something to think about is that we sell these kits so that the consumer can tackle this process on their own, which is totally in the cards. But a lot of people just don't feel comfortable doing it and would prefer to have somebody who has a lot of experience doing it, which is myself and a couple of other techs at the shop, handle this process. But again, it's very straightforward, but if you don't feel comfortable doing it, just continue to use that spot removal tool in your post-production until we can help you handle this, and we can go ahead and do that at that time. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about are the assets that you need to clean your sensor. So clearly you have a camera and you have a sense that there's dust on the sensor, and when you're talking about removable lens cameras, whether that's a mirrorless camera or a single lens reflex camera, micro four thirds, whatever the deal is, if you can take the lens off your camera and you switch those lenses out, or you maybe have a zoom lens that has like basically a pump built into the idea of the lens pushing air back into the camera when the sensor is exposed, odds are good your sensor will get dirty. There's no way that you can not have this happen. Sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes the dust is visible, sometimes it's not. So that's what we're targeting here. When you're talking about point and shoots and fixed lens cameras, you can't get in there, so don't sweat it. And if you do feel like there's dust on your sensor in those circumstances, you want to work with the manufacturer of that product to see if they offer a service to remedy what you feel like is sensor dust. Okay, so what we're going to use is going to be a rocket blower or blower. We're going to use a sensor swab, and these are individually packed with two ends that you can work with to clean your sensor, and you want to kind of the idea is use them once per cleaning, right? And a solution. So there's two types of solution which we sell. One of them is this one, which is for most of our micro four thirds APS-C and full frame cameras. It's a solution that's able to be used on any of those sensors. Sony does ask you to use a specific Aero Clips sensor cleaning fluid, which we do sell, and we've bundled into some of these sensor cleaning packs that we've got together for you guys. Okay, so before you start, you want to make sure that you have a fully charged battery, whether you're dealing with a single lens reflex camera or you're dealing with a mirrorless camera, because with a lot of mirrorless cameras, the sensor floats and it has a image stabilization element, and so it kind of drifts around within the chassis. So you need to be able to power on the camera to lock the sensor so that when you're working on cleaning it, it's not shifting around in there. And you do want to have a full charge just in case it takes you a bit of time to get the process done. The battery doesn't die on you midway through the process. When it comes to single lens reflex cameras, we need a full charge on the battery because we in essence are going to lock the mirror up and open the curtain in order to expose the sensor. And if we don't have a full charge on our camera, depending on the camera, it may not let you into the menu system to do these critical things to clean your sensor, and or midway through your process, you got your swab in the camera and you're working on your sensor, the battery dies and then the shutter closes and the mirror closes, and then it's just bad news. So first and foremost, full charge on your batteries before you begin this process. Now, When we move into doing the process, and again, we've got our clean space and we've got our assets, we've got our camera ready to go, the first thing that you want to do is get the camera set into an aperture priority mode. Now, in an aperture priority mode, what we're able to do is manipulate the aperture of the camera, which in essence is going to be important, because what we want to do once we've set our camera into our aperture priority mode is go ahead and move that aperture setting to the largest number, which means the smallest opening of your aperture, which also then means the most depth of field that we can get from that lens pairing and that camera, because this is going to be very important to really get a good glimpse of particulate on your sensor if it's there. So set this, in this camera I've got a Canon Rebel T6S is what I'm using right now. So I've set it into an aperture priority mode. I go ahead and toggle the wheel. The shutter speed and the ISO will automatically be set to give us a good exposure. And what I do is, there's a couple of ways that you can capture this image. You can go out on a bright day and point your camera up into the sky, and as long as you don't have a lot of random things in the sky, you can shoot a photo and you can get a good sense of how dirty your sensor might be. Alternatively, you can just use a high key, like white sheet of paper, and you point the camera at that sheet of paper at, you know, maybe like a focal length that's around 35 to 50 mil. You don't want it to be really wide, nor do you want it to be super tight. You want it kind of in a mid-range from a focal length. So I'm going to go ahead and set my camera to, and I've got a zoom lens in 18 to 135. So I'm going to set it basically at a 50 to 35 mil. I am then going to take my photograph of my white sheet of paper. I am then going to look at my image that I've generated, and it will be very clear whether or not you need to move forward with cleaning your sensor, because you'll see all this particulate and dust particles in your image because it's just an image of a white field, and so those things will pop out and really be there, which is also important when it comes to getting that aperture number set high. So once you have that sense, the next thing that you want to do is, with single reflex cameras, again, what we need to do is we need to get into our menu system and we need to lock the mirror up. Now, if you don't know how to do this, Google it or just browse through. You're going to see mirror lock up, or you're going to see a clean sensor with a secondary kind of portion of that menu system that will lock your mirror up and open your curtain for this specific job. So when I get here into my menu system on this particular Canon, I'm going to roll through here to one of my wrench settings, which is traditionally where it's found. I am looking for, so on this one, there's a sensor cleaning tab, which I move into, and now it says auto clean, which is, it vibrates the sensor and it cleans it for you, quote unquote. There's a clean now, which again is one that you can, so it's in an auto cleaning mode, so every time you power on the camera it's going to shutter and possibly clear debris from the thing, or you can do it like right now, I want to do that, so that's what this other one says. Or it says clean manually, so I drop down to that. I hit the yes button. It says mirror will lock up after manually cleaning sensor, turn power switch to off. So I say okay, and so I move through into that. Now there was a click, and what has happened is that inside my camera, when I remove my lens, I can see the sensor. The mirror is locked in an upright position, the curtain is open, and in there we can see the sensor. So it's a smooth, reflective surface, okay, is what you've got there. So the first step in this process is doing a dry blow on the sensor. So I take my rocket blower, I hold my camera firmly with the mount down, take my rocket blower, and not putting my rocket blower nipple into the camera chassis, but close to the flange where I mount the lens, I give it a few good puffs into the chassis of the camera. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn it off. click. I don't know if you guys heard that, but now the curtain has closed, the mirror is back down. And what I would do at this point is go ahead and mount my lens back on. With that high aperture setting, I would take that same photograph, and you might be surprised that just with your rocket blower, you've done what you need to do. That big particulate that you keep seeing in the sky or on somebody's face or something like this is gone, and you don't need to move into the secondary process. If it did not do it, you can try to rocket blow it again, but probably what you're going to need to do at this point is use your solution and your swab. So in that case, again, what we're going to want to do is get back into the menu system. We're going to need to find that area, which I found it once before, so I should be able to find it again. Turn the camera on, get into your menu system. We're going to lock that mirror up again and open the curtain clean manually. Here's my information to turn it off. Okay, ka-chunk. Mirror up, curtain open, sensor exposed. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpack my swab because we've dry blowed it, and now what we're going to need to do is get into the chassis of the camera and wipe the sensor. Don't be afraid, it's not a big deal. The sensors are more resilient than most people think, and with just a little bit of care and intent, running the swab over the sensor with a little bit of these solutions is nothing to be afraid of, and is something that tons of people do in all kinds of environments. I know of professional photographers that clean their sensor in their car when they're in the field. If they're getting particulate on their sensor and they're shooting video, you know, getting rid of that in post is murder. Or they're shooting stills and they just see something that's just a big booger and they don't want to mess with it in post, then, you know, doing this process is something that anyone can do pretty much anywhere, but you do want to try to create a clean environment before you move into this. So we're going to go ahead and unpack our swab and get it out of there. Okay, so the way that I do it with this two-sided swab is I just pull the plastic back and reveal one side of the swab. Okay, so in this case I'm doing a Canon, so I can use this Eclipse cleaner. So I take the lid off my cleaner and I'm leaving the bag on the bottom here so I can kind of keep this side clean in case I need to use it in this process. So I go ahead and put about, 3 or 4 drops on the tip of the swab, and I can see that it's becoming saturated, right? I can see the fluid is moving on to the swab, and don't be shy here. You want to try to create a little bit of a wet environment. Don't go crazy, but a few, drops is what you want to do. So then I hold my camera looking down into the chassis of the camera, and the way that I do this is I go ahead and slowly move my swab into the chassis of the camera, finding the edge of the sensor. Once I hit the sensor, I can feel it, it's in there. I slowly draw the swab across the middle of the sensor. And the way that I do it is I kind of lever the camera more than the swab, right? So you draw the swab across, you kind of shift the camera as you do that, and you're just kind of like sweeping the surface of it. You can put a little bit of pressure on there. You don't want to be so light that you're not going to get rid of stuff, but you don't want to go so heavy that you're going to like do some damage. So there's kind of this like nice little middle ground, right, that will allow you to do this. So once you've done it with one side of the swab, what I do is I flip the swab. I go in on the other side, make contact with the sensor, and slowly draw it across with intent, shift the camera, and then lift the sensor swab out of the camera. That ought to do it for most particulate and cleaning of your sensor. You rocket blow, maybe that did it. If it didn't do it, go ahead and move forward with swab and solution, a little bit of care and a little bit of intent. And cleaning your sensor is something that anybody can do. It's going to be better than it was. Maybe it won't be immaculate, but it's going to be better than it was because not only did you blow the sensor, but you swabbed it as well. So at that point, I set my swab down. I do have my one clean side. My other side has been contaminated and I don't want to use that one again. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off. I'm going to mount my lens. I'm going to take my photograph again and I'm going to look critically at my image, and odds are good that I've got it where I need to be and it's clean, quote unquote. Again, if you don't feel comfortable doing any of this, just wait. Soon we'll be open again and able to do this service for our clientele. But really, this is a skill set that any photographer should have in their arsenal, and really, there's nothing to be afraid of. Now, here's a thing too, when I talked about that fully charged battery, and when we talk about mirrorless cameras, we don't have to go into a menu system in order to lock the mirror up. The sensor is right there. So when I take the body cap off, boom, there's my sensor. I mean, it's right there. Sometimes there's a curtain that's covering that sensor, and sometimes in our mirrorless cameras, we have a in-body stabilization. So that sensor has the ability to shift within the chassis of the camera. What you want to do is power that camera on before you move into swabbing it, in order to lock the sensor so it's not shifting around when you're running the swab across it. But the process is exactly the same, minus that menu system maneuver to lock the mirror up, open the curtain, and expose the sensor. The other thing is that, the depth of the sensor relative to the mount is so much shallower, it's much easier to see, but just remember, if you've got a camera with in-body stabilization, power that camera on. That's going to lock the sensor, and that's going to give you an easier kind of overall process, and probably way less stressful when you begin to swab it, if that's something that you need to do. But I'm going to reiterate, most of the time when I'm helping clients in the shop, or I'm providing a service for somebody who's left the camera at the shop for me to help with, if I just hit it with that rocket blower, that does the trick most of the time. If it doesn't, move into that swab and solution process. Again, care, intent, don't be distracted, and you're gonna do great. All right, you guys, so that's basically the drill. I hope that helps out. We have pre-built packs at the shop to help you maneuver this on your own at home, and we're always here to field questions if you have them. Thanks so much, and we're gonna get out of this on the other side all together, and then we'll be back in business. And if you don't want to do it on your own, we're happy to do the service. Just sit tight with us and continue to use that spot removal tool. All right, you guys, deuces.